Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
Happy National Cat Day. Welcome to your Daily Detroit from Detroit's North End neighborhood. This is episode 367, recorded on Tuesday, October 29th, 2019. I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. And Jer, I am so glad that I finally have a legitimate excuse to bury my face in my cat's soft belly fur when I get home later today.
That is an amazing way to spend your evening.
Let's do it to it. A few days ago, we talked about the theater portion of the historic United Artists building in downtown Detroit being demolished as part of a $56 million apartment project. The developer is Emmett Moten. He has a long history with the city, including working with Mayor Coleman Young back in the day to do the General Motors Detroit Hamtramck plant deal that wiped out the Poletown neighborhood. Moten told the Detroit City Council that the theater had to come down as part of the requirements to get federal funds to make the project happen. But a new report by the Detroit News directly disputes that. It's good reporting, and we'll definitely link to it in the show notes. In the story, and I quote here from the public affairs specialist for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, quote, HUD did not impose a condition requiring the demolition of the theater. The borrower's proposal was to demolish the theater, end quote. This matters because Detroit's development market isn't healthy enough for traditional financing. Big developers like Dan Gilbert are often self-financing their construction and leveraging tax breaks and federal programs to make up the difference where banks don't lend. And despite some high-profile charitable programs, they don't lend much on a professional scale here in Detroit. The United Artists Project would be funded mostly by the federal agency through a program that allows for mortgages up to 40 years.
You know, Sven, whether or not you think the historic theater, there are some awesome pictures, by the way, up on historicdetroit.org that people should check out. Whether or not you think this thing should be saved, it seems like somebody here did not tell the truth. And I got to ask, is that the kind of person that we should be doing business with in the city going forward? I mean, if this statement is right and it turns out that Moten didn't tell the truth here, I got to ask, did he not tell the truth with the recent Saturday night building demolition that was all in the news a couple weeks ago? Because he was saying that it had to come down for 12 surface parking spaces, that it absolutely needed to make the deal work. Well, if he didn't tell the truth here, if it turns that out, did he not tell the truth before? Lots of questions.
I mean, at least he's talking about actually building something here beyond just a parking lot in the case of the Saturday night building downtown. So I'll give him that. But yeah, I agree. And look, we seem to be all too eager and willing to demolish, our buildings here in Detroit, which is basically our history. I mean, we are like, Detroit is lousy with, and I mean that the best possible way, with incredible architectural heritage, right? That we constantly are demolishing, and we see it over and over and over. And I think that we have people come here from other cities around the country and around the world and marvel at our collection of buildings and the architecture on display. We should do everything we can to save buildings like this and not tear them down.
The former CEO of Henry Ford Health System, Nancy Schlichting, has resigned her seat on the Michigan State University Board of Trustees over its handling of the Larry Nassar scandal. Schlichting leaves after just 10 months, saying she's frustrated by the board's unwillingness to launch an independent investigation of the scandal surrounding the former sports doctor and convicted sex offender. Schlichting was appointed to the board as a rare outsider last December by former Governor Rick Snyder. She sent a letter of resignation to current Governor Gretchen Whitmer, in which she said it had become clear that her desire to pursue the truth about Nassar was not shared by the board chair, Diane Byram, and several legacy and newer trustees. The board last month reversed itself in announcing that it would not move forward with a planned independent investigation and public report into Nassar and the school's culture because Byram and 3 other trustees wanted a narrower focus. Schlichting said that sealed her decision to resign. Governor Whitmer will now look for a replacement for a term that ends in 2023. Sven, I know you've got some thoughts on this big story.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been following this whole, terrible and horrifying story about Larry Nassar for a long time, and this is not a good sign, frankly, when somebody like Nancy Schlichting leaves your board. I mean, you want somebody like Nancy Schlichting on your college board of trustees, frankly.
She's very well respected.
Very well respected.
And if she's saying stuff like this tells me something's very wrong.
She led recently stepped down from being the CEO of Henry Ford Health System, which is a huge Detroit-based health system. She did a very good job, steering it and growing the health system during a time of massive change in the healthcare industry. She's served on boards all around the country, literally, and I think she has. I'm not sure if she's still on it, but she served on the Detroit Symphony Orchestra board, among many others. She's got lots of integrity. She did praise the new Michigan State University president, Samuel Stanley, but this, I think, frankly, hints at what I have long suspected and felt are bigger problems at Michigan State. Right now, Attorney General Dana Nessel is, she's doing her own investigation into how Michigan State handled the Nassar scandal. She's been trying to get the university to cough up around 6,000 documents that it is citing attorney-client privilege in withholding from her. And she's also been trying to get an interview with former university interim president, John Engler, who is also stiff-arming her. Look, Michigan State for a long time now, it's a dirty secret, but for a long time now, I think they've been dealing with this kind of culture that gave us Larry Nassar, right? I mean, I think and I hope that he was the worst of it. I think we would probably by now know if he wasn't. But I mean, look, you've grown up here in Detroit. You know a lot of people from Michigan State. Like, that school for a long time has had a problem with sexual assaults, rape culture, etc. There are lots of reports of the same kind of behavior from members of the school's football and basketball teams, which are, that's a huge part of Michigan State University's culture, quite frankly. And as well, there are suggestions, nothing confirmed, of course, but there are suggestions that, the coaches, Mark D'Antonio for football and basketball coach Tom Izzo, have, kind of try to, pull their clout to cover things up there. Look, sports rules the roost at Michigan State.
I mean, it rules the roost in Michigan and Metro Detroit.
Everywhere, sure, of course. But people don't seem to care. I mean, the media, especially across the state, just seems to worship at the altar of Tom Izzo and think that, he's the golden boy who can do no harm. I mean, they're preseason number 1 basketball team, right? I mean, so what does, allegations of a, unsafe environment for women matter amidst all that? I mean, I think there are big problems there that the school really needs to get serious about addressing. Personally, I mean, yes, people who know me will point out, like, well, you're a University of Michigan alum, you're just you just don't like Michigan State. Not true. But I think that there are serious issues that the school has got to get serious about looking at, no matter how much it's going to hurt them.
The news of Wayne State University's Detroit Promise program, offering free tuition to high school grads who live in Detroit, was hailed by many as a big and important step forward for the city. But it turns out not everyone on the Wayne State board was on board. 3 of 8 board members want President Roy Wilson to resign. They called the promise a desperate measure by a president on the ropes. In a statement, Michael Buscito, Sandra Hughes O'Brien, and Dana Thompson said that Wilson didn't brief the board about the plan until the last second and overstepped his authority. In their view, the tuition pledge has major financial, political, and reputational implications. They say the president did not inform nor discuss with all members of the board the details of the pledge prior to the morning the tuition pledge was announced.
For context, the 3 have been taking shots at Wilson all year long and have asked him to resign before over a separate issue involving the move from the Detroit Medical Center to Henry Ford Health System for their medical school partnership. Wilson was recently awarded a 5-year contract extension, and he seems to have the support of a majority of board members.
A Traverse City-based farm cooperative has issued a voluntary recall of several varieties of fresh apples due to concerns they could be contaminated with the Listeria bacteria. North Bay Produce says it has notified the FDA and its customers after a test of products revealed the presence of the bacteria, which can cause symptoms ranging from fever and nausea to convulsions and miscarriage. It can be fatal in young children, the elderly, or people with weakened immune systems. Varieties of the nearly 2,300 cases and 2 bulk bins of apples covered by the recall include popular varieties like Honeycrisp, Fuji, Jonathan, and Macintosh. They were sold under the brands Great Lakes and North Bay Produce Pure Michigan and sold in unbranded clear plastic totes and white paper tote bags. They were shipped between October 16th and the 21st to 8 states, including Michigan. If you've purchased apples packaged that way, you should take them back to the store. Officials say there are no known illnesses related to the apples. And of course, we'll put a link in the show notes for more information.
So food recalls like this always bring up an issue that I have with kind of how the media reports on them and sort of the underlying issues that are often responsible for this. Whether it's like salmonella or like, I think recent years there have been like spinach and lettuce recalls over E. coli contamination. In this case, Listeria monocytogenes. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Well done.
It's found in soil and water, but it typically contaminates fruits or vegetables when animal manure is used as a fertilizer. So, and I think the case is often that the same case is true for salmonella and E. coli. What we're talking about here is factory farming, a lot of the modern like factory farming problems. A lot of times what you're getting also, and gets really gross, but if you read into it, it is disgusting. Poop lagoons, animal manure lagoons that fill up and overflow during heavy rains and flood nearby fields, spread contamination and all kinds of awful stuff. So to be clear, we don't know that that's the case here. North Bay Produce may not know either. It could be something more innocuous, but we shouldn't be having bacteria contamination of apples in 2019. Just saying.
There's a new update about the much-awaited Udolph Garden on Belle Isle. Recently, we told you about that planned installation of the garden by renowned landscape architect Piet Udolph had been postponed from this fall due to persistent flooding on the island park. Now, organizers say they've been working to update the master plan to make sure the garden can handle fluctuating groundwater levels and potential future flooding on Belle Isle. That seems like that's going to be an ongoing thing. The new design calls for perennial beds raised up to street level and bordered by 2 retaining walls, with a grassy slope on the southern edge to help with drainage. It also features expanded planted wetlands that will improve habitat along Lake Tacoma. The Great Lakes have surpassed 100-year records for high water levels this year, and experts predict water levels will be high again next summer. Construction will begin with moving earth this fall and early winter, with soils and bed preparation in spring and early summer. They're hoping to start planting in mid-July. Sven, I know this is a project you're pretty excited about. We had 2 of the big people from the Udolph Garden on the podcast. Maura Campbell, Duncan Campbell talked all about it. What do you think of these new plans?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, I'm glad that they thought about the flooding. I kind of failed to put 2 and 2 together, frankly. I had heard about the high flooding on Belle Isle and, over on the east side in Rivertown, or in Harbor Island, for all summer long and everything. But yeah, it's great. Done right, I think a lot of these plants can actually probably help with the flooding by, serving as kind of like a rain garden with the deep roots and ability to better absorb water. Warren's Lame Duck City Council has voted to override Mayor Jim Fout's veto of its list of approved medical marijuana licenses. The Warren Weekly reports the 5-1 vote last week paves the way for up to 15 medical marijuana dispensaries in Warren. That's despite at least 7 lawsuits over how the city handled medical marijuana licensing. The paper reports there have been allegations of improper scoring, secret meetings, and ordinance violations as officials evaluated 65 applicants who sought licenses in the city. A judge twice ordered the process halted. 6 of the 7 members of the city council plan to leave after the next election on Tuesday. Meanwhile, further north in Macomb County, the Clinton Township Board of Trustees voted a second time against allowing regulated marijuana facilities in its community. The Macomb Daily reports that the 4-3 vote means that a petition signature drive to force a ballot issue in March will likely move forward.
Earlier, we told you about the last Kmart in Macomb County, located at 10 Mile in DeQuinder and Warren, closing later this year. Now we know what will go in its place. The Macomb Daily says that a U-Haul moving and storage will be built on the 10-acre Kmart site, pending a rezoning of the land. But wait, there's more. Just south of the Kmart on DeQuinder, a golf center and driving range recently closed. That's going to become a new industrial building or warehouse distribution center for a yet-to-be-named tenant. Both of these are near the old Hazel Park racetrack. That's where a new Amazon distribution facility is being built. Both properties are near I-75 and I-696, making it excellent for industrial development.
The fate of Clawson School District is in question. The Oakland County District has dropped to just 1,500 students. That's a decline of 18% from a decade ago. A meeting will be held tonight, that's Tuesday, to get parents' feedback on what should be done next. Ideas include, but aren't limited to, merging with either Troy or Royal Oak schools or closing schools altogether. Although there's a minor increase in state funding per student in the pipeline, the continuing drop in enrollment means that the state increase makes up just a quarter of the funding gap. Smaller school districts have had a tough time as Metro Detroit has stopped growing over the past few decades.
I mean, Sven, this is another case of where we kind of want to have our cake and eat it too. You know, you got roads, you got schools.
It's affected a lot of districts. I mean, Grosse Pointe, Farmington Hills.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how well off the district itself is. The students are funded, the districts are funded on a per pupil basis for the most part. I mean, there's some variations. But
and it's just demographics. Like, you know, people are either having fewer children or they're just, you know, moving out of some of these cities.
Well, I mean, Metro Detroit, and this is a stat we've touched on before on the show, but Metro Detroit has about the same population that it did like 40 years ago. The rest of the country's grown like 60%. And yet think about how much has been built since, 1970, 1980 in this region, right? Think about how much is
for the same population.
For the same amount of people. That's the thing, is that we have about the same amount of people. Everybody talks about the city losing people, but the region hasn't grown. And like, that's kind of like the false narrative that a lot of suburban leaders have been pushing forward, is that, oh, everything's fine because we're growing. Well, the thing is that economically we're all connected together. We're not islands. And as a group, we just haven't been adding people. When we have kids, they move away. And what happens is we build more and more stuff. We have less people to pay for it. This isn't politics. This is math. And that's something that I don't know if we're going to be able to like get our arms around. I get nervous that we're just going to keep making these same decisions and wonder, well, oh, schools are closing. Oh, our roads are terrible. And then we're sitting there, and I get it. People are tapped out. Our income is not...
We're paying for more stuff, more infrastructure with the same amount of people. I mean, of course.
I mean, exactly. Look at the fastest growing areas. You've got areas out in Macomb County, what is it, Romeo? One of those...
Macomb Township.
Is one of the fastest growing areas. You've got
South Lyon.
All those areas require new sewers, new everything that's got to be built in. Meanwhile, we're not maintaining the systems that we already have.
Okay, that'll do it for today's Daily Detroit.
If you like what we're doing, be like Rick, who became a member of The Weekend. People power is the best way to push Detroit's conversation forward. So join us at patreon.com/dailydetroit, and thank you. I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.